Mornye has been revealed to be coming in Wuthering Waves version 3.0 as the second banner character. With her incredibly unique design as well as her galaxy theming in her splash art, I've been wondering what Mornye is going to do in-game. So that's what I'm going to be speculating about today. And as usual, I want to start off with what I believe are going to be her attributes and her weapon type. Now, I'm not super dead set on these for anything, to be honest, but I do have some that I feel are going to be the most likely for Mornye to use. I want to start out with the weapon type because, well, I don't exactly have evidence, but I have more of a feeling. And that is that I believe Mornye is going to end up being a rectifier character, because of course, we haven't had enough of those. With all of the galaxy theming in her splash art, as well as her seemingly being physically less capable, I definitely think that she's going to end up using a ranged weapon of some kind. I just don't really see her using gauntlets, a sword, or especially a broadblade, because she just seems physically weaker than other characters. And especially in her legs, you can see that her physical state is gonna end up being a big part of her character. So I just don't see her using a very heavy weapon, like a broadblade. A sword could theoretically be possible, but I think it'd be way more fitting for Mornye as a character to use a ranged weapon like a rectifier or a pistol. And out of rectifier or pistol, I have more of a feeling about rectifier. It simply feels a lot more fitting with the galaxy themery. Because while it would be incredibly cool to have her shoot space bullets, I just don't see it happening. So I am pretty locked in for rectifier as an answer, but I could theoretically also see her being a pistol character. Maybe she could be gauntlets or sword, but one thing I'm definitely sure on is she's definitely not gonna be a broadblade character. I just don't see that happening. As for her elements, I don't really think there is any of them that I have any sort of preference for, but I do think that Mornye should be a Glacio character. I know that Kuro Games doesn't really use the coloring conventions that other gacha games would use to decide its elements, but I don't know, I just look at Mornye and I think, yeah, that looks like a Glacio character to me. I also said in my previous video that Spectro and Glacio are the two elements that have been waiting for a new character the longest, but Glacio is in a lot more dire of a situation. Last time they got a new addition to their roster was Carlotta in 2.0. And I don't know if you remember, but that was almost 11 months ago at the time of posting this video. So Glacio really needs some more content, and I think Mornye is the best chance that they've had in a while. I do think it is incredibly funny, however, how this would imply that we only ever get Glacio characters in version 0.0 releases, and I think that would be extremely funny. I think Glacio would also sort of fit her personality. She's being described to us as a more silent character, someone who would rather just work on her own stuff than actually talk to people, which, might I add, she's incredibly real for. That type of personality just fits the Glacio element to me. Although, now that I'm thinking about it more, Glacio has a lot of outgoing characters like Ling Yong and Carlotta, but, let's just ignore that for the sake of the agenda, okay? Okay. Moving on, I don't really know what kind of attribute would fit galaxy-themed attacks, because, well, the galaxy is kind of just emptiness. That's what space really is when it comes down to it. It's just vast nothingness. Like, you look at air, that's at least a thing. Air is a thing. But space is just absolutely nothing other than the occasional star and planets, or just asteroids. So if we're going with a galaxy-themed character, it's really hard to pinpoint an element to this. So while my reasoning is far from perfect, or, you know, even defended by any sort of evidence at all, I just kinda get the feeling she'll be a Glacio Rectifier character. But now it's time to talk about what I think Mornye should do. And honestly, we're gonna get into some more territory where I kind of just have very little idea of what I believe I want Mornye to do. I do think she's gonna end up being more of a supportive character, because I do think Linnea is gonna end up being a DPS, which I talked about in my last video. And usually, Kuro doesn't really release two main DPSs in the same update, so if Linnea is the DPS, Mornye can't really be a DPS character. I mean, okay, she could be, but she wouldn't be intended to be a DPS is what I'm saying. Yuno was an exception. So, what kind of support do I believe Mornye should be? Well, I think Mornye could be a universal healer like Shorekeeper. I don't know if Kuro is gonna end up wanting to do that, because they have been trying to stray away from the universal healers for quite a while now, but I do think it is possible. I just don't really get the vibes from Mornye that she would be capable of dealing a large amount of damage. Although maybe she would be able to, but I just don't think it's really in her nature to be of a large damaging role. So maybe she does end up being a way more supportive character. Shorekeeper has also had such a tight grip on the game's meta that I do believe that Kuro would want to benefit off of the hype behind a universal healer, especially during a new region when so many people are coming back. They would want to get as many people pulling as possible, so why not make some really good characters? But that's kind of all the evidence I really have for Mornye being a universal healer. Well, I say evidence, but it's not really evidence at all. It's more like just the ramblings of an insane person, which have absolutely zero basis or backing at all. The issue with making her a sub DPS is that I feel that there's not really any sort of role that she could be fulfilling that we really need at the moment. She could end up being an introduction to Glacio Shafe, but I mean, I don't know. It would need to be a Phoebe-type character, where she can be both a DPS and a sub-DPS, or she would need to have some sort of utility for other negative status teams. So I just don't really see her being an introduction to Glacio Shafe either. She probably isn't a generic hypercarry buffer either, because the only good Glacio DPS we have right now already has the perfect sub-DPS. So what kind of role would Mornye even need to fulfill? Maybe Mornye ends up being a universal liberation buffer, like what Yuno is for heavy attacks, or maybe even a skill damage version, which, now that I think about it, isn't even that bad of an idea. But a large part of what made Yuno good is the fact that she also has such high personal damage, which I said earlier I don't believe Mornye will do. So where does that leave us? I honestly just don't really know what Mornye should do. One final idea that I do have is that Mornye could be an introduction to a new mechanic that 3.0 is going to end up focusing on. But again, I'm not really sure on if they're gonna end up doing this, because that would feel a lot like how they introduced negative status with Phoebe, and I just don't want to go down that route again. It did make Kuro a lot of money, so it is pretty likely that they're gonna end up making a new mechanic again and then trying to shill it on 5-star units to make some money, but I don't know, I just don't want that, so I don't even want to entertain the possibility. But that's just what I think Mornye should do. Let me know down in the comments below what you think Mornye should do. And if you have any questions, be sure to join my Discord server, which is linked in the description down below. And while you're down there, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you just want to see more of me, you can check out my second channel, which is also linked in the description. But that'll be all from me. Peace.